meeting notice, Aaron?
Yep, it was posted yesterday, which was October 19th, around noon at both schools, sent to all members of the media, as well as Cuba City Hall and the Village of Digital.
All right, thank you. All right, we're gonna have the presentation from Brea Architects on the facility.
Excellent. Good to see all of you again. Fun to be back. Matt Wolfert with Brea. Excited to be joining you again. Brian Sands with Brea. And then Kyle Kramer from Kramer is here as well. We wanted to give you kind of an update on process. We were commenting that you two get the great seats, right? We're always, your backs are to us. Give you an update on process. So macro level, you remember way back to the beginning of this conversation, really talking about doing a facilities assessment, facility study, and a master plan for both our elementary and middle high school sites. So when we say master plan, we're talking about looking at all of our needs. Some of them might be aspirations, some of them might be true needs, but mapping out a long-range vision for what could be. So as we go through this tonight, when you see plans, don't think of these plans as a single phase one investment, but it's really difficult to make a good, smart decision for a phase one investment often if there isn't the bigger picture in mind. Many schools we go into, this is a little unique here, we don't see that a lot. You haven't done 8, 9, 10 different additions over the years. Most of them are concentrated on the back of the building. But most schools we go into, they'll say, now we need a gym or we need an auditorium. And the most logical place to go with this is where they just put 6 classrooms 3 years earlier. And it's normal, right? You put them where in the most affordable place to put them at the time was. So it was a smart decision in that moment. Going through the master planning process, our hope is that we can help prevent some of that. We still make a good solid phase one investment if you as a board and the community agree with that direction. But we don't cripple your ability to do a phase 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, with future boards and future community input. So again, think master plan as we get into this tonight. This isn't a single phase investment. Process to date, we've had half a dozen meetings on site with the district team. We've had engineers through touring, reviewing plumbing, HVAC, electrical systems at both the elementary school and here at the middle high school. Our architectural team has been through and we've toured and we've done an ADA assessment. We've documented roof needs, door needs, building envelope needs. That's the first piece of this, the facility assessment. So Ryan will briefly walk you through the study document side of this. This isn't ready quite yet for prime time. There's a little bit of work to do yet for us to finish it up. So we want to show you what's in it, show you generally what it's going to be like. As soon as we're final, we'll obviously bring you printed copies so you've got a version of the final facilities assessment and study document in hand. After we get through that, obviously answer any questions you have. We'll then jump to our initial thoughts on conceptual site and floor plans for both of the schools. So that's the fun part. We're going to get into solutions right away. Looking forward to getting your feedback and thoughts on that. But this is a really foundational piece as we talk to the community, is we have to be able to say with confidence that our buildings are in good condition. And anything you see that we point out in these reports generally that is identified as a need, the vast majority of this, if not all of it, is typical for the age of your buildings. It's not born out of neglect. Your team has worked really hard over the last year to really catch up on a lot of areas of just routine maintenance and things. So it seems like you really made great strides in that area. So there are needs, but the needs don't jump out as being anything more than typical for the age of the buildings. And again, it's critically important that these aren't viewed as neglect, because they're not. It's just the reality of owning the hundreds of thousands of square feet of building that you do, built at different ages over time, and usually a lot of pressure on budget, operational budget, to operate school and offer opportunities to students while still funding boilers and roofs and windows and doors and all the things that we know cost money and to keep a school going. So with that, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind kind of introducing the study document, and then again, questions, and we'll jump into the concepts.
Sounds good. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the format and what the information looks like. We've continued to evolve our template over the years with all of our experience, and we've migrated towards more and more graphic information. So hopefully, as you see the pages, it becomes relatively easy to comprehend at a first glance. Like Matt said, this is a draft, so still work in progress. So the detail we won't go into tonight, but I want to give you an update on where we are. So these are the main sections. So we've got an introduction, kind of a summary page, and then we go through each building individually in more detail. I'll skip through some of this early stuff. So like I said, we try to communicate as much of the information graphically as we can. So you see this color key here with the assessments of good, fair, and poor. And I'll just quickly read these. So good is no visible damage, wear, or need for repair, no replacement required. Fair is some visible damage, wear, need for repair or replacement. And poor is substantial visible damage, wear, or need for replacement. Again, a lot of this is from a visual review walkthrough of the building with engineers. We obviously can't see things that are under the slab or in walls, and so a lot of this is based on visual. There is some options from some of our MEPs for cameraing some piping and things like that based on age. So there are some additional options as far as investigation. This is just a general look at the scorecard, again, communicated graphically. And so you'll see these different aspects of the buildings and your systems within that, the interior finishes and the exterior envelope, like Matt mentioned. Those are all the different areas that we've gone through along with site and ADA. So this is that executive summary page. So again, highlighting your 3 buildings, the elementary, middle school, and high school, obviously with the middle and high school being connected. In general, all 3 are in fair condition. We've got some enrollment information here showing your 10-year enrollment average has been between 600 and 700, so pretty consistent there. Some general site information. Obviously, you're all very familiar with your campus. And then we dive into each individual building. So again, you're going to see a lot of the blue, green, and red indicators so that visually as you're seeing the information, hopefully it's jumping out where the different assessments are falling. So this is the summary page for the elementary school, age of building, average classroom size, overall square footage, and again, the enrollment summary information.
Enrollment, if you're wondering why those bars on the right are really low, remember in 2017, that's when we went from a K-8 building to a K-5 building. So
that's building by building enrollment. Yep, good catch.
Again, some summary information, site plans.
It's one of the more unique elementary site plans we've ever seen. The big circle dropped on a piece of grass, but
the whole elementary school is all from 1966, the original building, no additions thus far. Then we get into the building system. So like Matt had said before, we walked through with our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. So they all looked through the systems and provided engineering reports summarizing their findings. So again, in general, and I won't go through the individual line items here, but you can see graphically, again, that same indicator as far as what they found in their assessment of the system. In this case, as you heard me mention, some of the piping based on age and material could require some additional investigation. So those are some of the things jumping out on this page. So more plumbing, we go through electrical, and mechanical. So for each of the 3 buildings, we've got assessments and a bunch of different line items of information for each of those systems.
At the elementary, this is really reflective of the big investment you made as part of the last referendum. Is that correct? If memory serves me right, that's why these systems are in such a great place. They're not, a lot of them were original 60s at the time you upgraded them. So you'll see when we get to the plan, the conceptual plan piece, there's still 30-40% of the school maybe that hadn't had the upgrades made related to flooring and if ceilings were done. So flooring, cabinetry, some of those things. But the elementary overall on the building system side is really in a good place, and that's just due to the great investment you made as part of the last referendum project.
So we also go through and look at some of your interior finishes, so flooring and ceiling. We look at doors, those types of things. In general, fair and good, especially obviously in the areas where you've made investment, like Matt said. We've got some plan diagrams that point out some specific conditions that were noted on the previous page, just as far as some specific conditions that may want to be addressed. We go through and document not only condition, but also type of flooring and ceiling materials, noting specifically, again, based on a visual, ones that might potentially contain, for instance, like asbestos or something like that. There are some products that over the years, based on size or visual material, you can kind of make a guess that it might. We did not do any type of environmental assessment as part of this. The district does have some past information on that, and obviously as part of any potential work you would do in the future, that's something we would recommend. So here you can see the flooring type. Obviously, you have a lot of acoustical tile in the elementary school. Similarly for flooring, we do both a condition assessment based on a visual walkthrough, as well as documenting the different types that you have. So that those diagrams are going to be consistent across all three buildings. And then the exterior analysis, so looking at both site and the exterior envelope of the building. So looking at masonry, the roofing, doors and windows, those types of things, and giving those an assessment rating, again, using that color coding.
The biggest challenges there are just the roof, right? I think we all know we have some challenges that exist with that existing roofing system. And then some of our asphalt drives, parking areas have served you well, but are at the end of their useful life. So that's probably the two things that are driving that from good to fair. Windows have been done, if I remember correctly. And
yep.
so it really is kind of the roof and some of the asphalt areas that are driving that building need.
Yeah, windows, as you can see, are in good condition. The roof was a big note that it needs to be replaced. So that's obviously what this is reflecting. And then just some assessment of the various conditions within the site. We then go through and we do a check on some typical ADA things. So this is things that are very common, again, in buildings of your vintage. So there are things that you're basically grandfathered in on at the moment, but if you were to do a certain amount of work, we would want to assess where we would want to look at ADA upgrades. So some of the typical things, especially in buildings of the ages that you have, are door clearances. So there's required push and pull clearances that often, because of when ADA was put in place in the 90s, they're not in older vintages of buildings, as well as, toilet rooms is another common one that we come across and that you do have some instances of in the buildings. And so again, noting some specific spots in the plan for reference of where those things were observed. The middle school, obviously in good condition, being your newest building, so that's not a surprise.
We have this wrong in the executive summary, because I think we had this fair. It obviously is good, since it's
Oh.
only 6 or 7 years old, right? So we'll get that cleaned up.
Yeah, I don't need to go through each building in detail unless you have specific questions or want me to scroll through. So each of the three buildings are assessed in a similar format, similar information, similar graphic key, so that again, hopefully when you're just glancing at the page visually, you can start to get an idea. And even when we reviewed a draft, like with Aaron and some of the district team members, it was easy to spot that red and be like, oh, what's that item? Let's talk about that one more. So when you do get it, hopefully you have that same kind of ease of absorbing the information.
We're trying to make this very easy for our community to interact with as well. This doesn't end up, we used to do a 100-page written report, word after word, a lot of architectural engineering speak, and we just found that obviously doesn't work for many community members in terms of A, understanding what the challenges are, or B, committing to actually digging in and understanding. So we're hopeful, and we think this is really heading in the right direction in terms of graphically documenting things that are good. We talk about the challenges all the time. We have to celebrate the good things, because it's really important that we remind the community and ourselves of the great investments you've made. So that's why you're going to see both of those as you go through this document. Any specific areas you want us to go into? Middle school, I think we can move past that unless there's questions, but anything you want us to specifically dive into at the high school level?
Were there, at the middle school, there were no findings of need?
Not in terms of the plumbing, HVAC, and electrical side, correct? I mean, those systems are new. I think there was an existing, is that a pressurization challenge, which you guys addressed this summer, right? So we didn't include that in the report because that was already being dealt with and addressed. So are you aware of any challenges that should be there? Okay, no, I think that building served you really well, continues to, and We didn't have any documented areas of need that I'm aware of there.
Yeah, we did, but we did the same, material documentation, flooring types, ceiling types, all of that. So all that information is still documented in the same way.
So do you have a question?
Yeah, the round school's got plumbing issues with piping.
Yep, I believe that was documented in the plumbing report. So our report will document known plumbing challenges that are identified by a user, right? Our facility staff knows that we're having pinhole leaks in our water supply lines. We're assuming we have sanitary challenges just because of the age, but we didn't put a camera down every single one and trace it to find how much, what percentage. But based on a 1966 vintage, likely galvanized, likely starting to corrode, we would assume, and I believe the report recommends assuming that our below grade sanitary lines are likely at the end of their useful life.
They have an issue because they got a belly in them going out in the parking lot.
So the main lateral has a challenge. Okay, we'll make sure we get that noted.
Challenges out of the kitchen area with drainage.
Okay,
But I can remember.
on the sanitary side?
Mhm.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the sinks and that.
Yep, okay.
The grease pits about had it.
Well, you'll see an option coming up here that would probably deal with that. So, good foreshadowing.
Full on memory.
That's good.
Yeah, and here you can see this is the summary page for the high school. ADA is the thing that's listed as poor, and again, that's nothing to do with anything that the district has been doing from a maintenance or a building standpoint. It's just the age of the building, and the big challenges there are, like I said, toilet rooms and door swings, but then also just the level changes and some of them being harder to navigate if you do have a disability or accessibility needs. So.
And we're still relying on our lower level locker rooms for some uses. So that's a big trigger, right? Because we know we don't have access down to those at all. So again, really for the age of the building and for the number of different iterations and chunks and things that I put on, it's in a good place, and you're continuing to make investments, so that's a positive. But any building of this age with 90,000 square feet of space, there's always going to be needs, and that's normal. I think that's to be expected. So as we get into the option and solution exploration, we're going to be working through prioritizing with you what are the highest priority items that you may want to address immediately, and which would you want to plan for, either through an operating budget or to move off into a future phase of investment. So any other questions? Again, we don't want to breeze through this. You can't really see a whole lot from your distance. We'll get this finalized, and like I said, we'll get you a hard copy, and would love to continue having dialogues about that as we move forward. Aaron, anything?
Nope.
All good there? Okay. Should we jump into our first swing at potential solutions? These are going to look really final because we do everything in a computer, but they're not. Consider these hand sketches from back in the day that can get revised 10 times. I'll do elementary if you want to get it up. I'll hand the elementary up first.
I guess
They're all
because
stapled together.
we went sort of in depth in the elementary about, some of the challenges, I guess, other than ADA. What, can you give me the short version of what you found in high school?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we just breeze through middle high school sorry, keep saying middle high school. It's middle high school. Sorry. And some of the things we saw.
Yeah, so I would say, there's a handful of things within the systems. I think some of the same plumbing concerns that Matt just referenced, some fixtures that, could be replaced. As we get into some of the interior and exterior, I think the envelope, there's just some, again, based on age, need for probably some masonry repair and tuck pointing, some doors that are maybe, the hollow metal doors get rusted over time from salt and just our Wisconsin weather. And so there's some envelope repairs that could be considered. There's a couple of areas, specifically this one, if I can get the mouse in the right spot here. There's some drainage issues that were brought up in our walkthroughs that we would want to potentially take a look at. So there's some things related to the envelope. We've talked about some flooring and ceiling replacement in certain areas where, again, it's just, based on age and wear and tear, they could be considered to be replaced. and then some, spatial and educational needs as well, which we'll get into a bit more with the options.
I think you'll see the general, and you'll see this as we jump into the options, kind of the main academic hall from main entrance down that hall. A lot of that is somewhat original in terms of, just aesthetics, cabinetry, flooring, et cetera, doors, those types of things. So you'll see that noted as we get into the solution as maybe an area of consideration for improvement.
Yeah, so here's some of that exterior analysis. So again, just some, wear and tear over the years and things that could be addressed. Certain doors, again, like I said, probably largely based on material. So like these doors here are aluminum and tend to hold up to salt and weather, longer than a hollow metal door would. Windows, general, were either good or fair. So nothing imminent there, but some things, again, as you're talking master plan, things that you could project out in the future that you'd want to consider or have on a list. And then again, the ADA stuff is not something that you would have to do with immediacy, but could be something that would be considered. And if you were to undertake any work, we would certainly want to consider, and we would update where we're doing some type of work in order to make things compliant. Those are, again, ones where, depending on goals, you can come up with solutions to solve some of the problems. Others are a bit more intensive, where you have to make structural changes in order to get things to be compliant.
There's a great deal of subjectivity to some of this, not the ADA as much. It's right, there's guidelines we can apply, but when you see this report, you might think something's fine, making it fair. You might think it's okay, making it good, right? So as you see it, there is obviously subjectivity that goes into this. We're trying to use our decades of knowledge of being in other schools a bit as a benchmark when we create that good, fair, poor. But I wouldn't lose a ton of sleep over something categorized as poor, because there might just be one or two components that are bringing it to that category, whereby the vast majority within that area aren't. So there's a lot here, but you're really, I think, confident in a really good place. And a lot of it is because of your recent investments and the great work that your facilities team has been doing to make some upgrades, even as the summer has gone on, and you've addressed some of the lower hanging, more eminent challenges through the operating budget.
I just want to mention these 2 pages. These are towards the end in the appendix, but they're just a visual reference for all of you and your community members as we're going through and giving that good, fair, poor judgment, which Matt said it is, somewhat subjective, obviously based on our experience. These are example images of, what each of those conditions would reflect in a building. So, if a ceiling is poor, we have examples of what that might look like, damaged ceiling tile, obvious leaks, missing tiles, those types of things. So we've got one for interior conditions and one for exterior, just as a visual reference for you and community members as they're looking through the facility study.
So as we jump into conceptual plans, you're not going to see a lot of the things that were identified here in the report on plans, because many of them don't show up. Chuck's comment on, the pipe below the ground, the sanitary lateral at the elementary, that's not going to show up on a plan. So know that as we're building solutions, the solutions are a combination of both the report and the infrastructure needs in combination with our engagement efforts. So a number of meetings with the district leadership team. Staff survey has been issued, and we're getting feedback from staff through a written survey. We're going to do some listening sessions with staff coming up to share conceptual plans and get their thoughts on areas of need. Staff, I don't believe have seen these plans yet, right? We wanted the board to see them first. So hopefully what you see tonight, again, they're going to look more final than they are. They're still very conceptual, so we're looking for your feedback on them. But we'll start at the elementary level, elementary school. And Ryan, if you don't mind taking the lead on this, and I'm curious how many of you jumped ahead already and looked at that. Oh, I got one. One had to jump ahead to the high school already. No, we'll go ahead on the elementary, and then we'll get into the high school where there's quite a bit to look at.
So like we talked about when we were going through the study document, obviously you've made some investment at the elementary, and that's very reflective in the findings of the study. As we were evaluating some of the needs from a space perspective, one of the things that got brought up was the cafeteria and the size and location of that, along with the kitchen. So this concept considers a cafeteria and kitchen addition in the northwest corner, connected to the existing building. Does have a little bit of impact on the site, obviously, with where it's placed. So there's some modifications to the site circulation to support that, including potentially a new driveway and curb cut. So that's what's shown here in the gray. But I'll jump to the plan because I think it'll make a little more sense as we get into
Getting to a circle is harder than you might think. The first few options are like, they just don't work overly well. I think this is the best option when you're starting with a circle.
Yeah, we did study options in all 4 quadrants of where you have existing circulation connections. So one thing when we're looking, especially at this high level, again, the lines look hard, but this is very preliminary. But one thing that we're always considering is when we add on to existing buildings, we typically need what's called a firewall to separate the existing building from the new building from a fire protection standpoint and a building area separation standpoint. And when we have those types of conditions, it also creates limitations on new and existing openings. So in this case, we've got a good connection point at that existing entry, and it's fairly narrow, which makes the firewall condition small. And then we also want to stay farther away from existing openings if we can, so that we don't have to modify or protect or reduce those because of the proximity of the new building. This location, we felt like for a cafeteria kitchen addition works really well from a connection standpoint and also from the standpoint of community use. So it's adjacent to the parking, it's by the main entry. You'd have the ability to separate it for any evening use. What we're showing is a cafeteria that would be sized to handle the entire student body in one lunch period. So that gives some more flexibility with scheduling and educational minutes, a new kitchen, and then some support areas where you could have bathrooms and some of the other spaces that would be needed to support the new construction. Suggesting some renovation work at your main entry to maintain your secure vestibule operation that you have currently with the office. And then within the building, it creates some more flexibility educationally. One of the other needs from an educational lens that we heard brought up was the desire for more STEAM space and potentially even some more dedicated age groupings of STEAM space. So by moving the cafeteria and kitchen into the addition, it frees up some space in the middle of the building here for what we're showing as potentially 2 dedicated rooms that could be equipped for your STEAM programs, which for those that aren't familiar, STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. We also would renovate the spaces that didn't get the finish upgrades from the last round of work. So that would be new ceilings, flooring, lighting, fresh coat of paint, new casework. So updating that. And then we also talked about potentially removing the operable partitions that you have between some of the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms and replacing those with solid walls. Those are older partitions. They're harder to operate, and acoustically, they don't provide the same separation that a solid wall does. So that's a consideration as well. You'd have the existing cafeteria as a multi-purpose space to provide flexibility from an indoor physical education and activity standpoint, especially in inclement weather, and it could also serve multiple functions throughout the day. And then some existing locker rooms that, this would probably be, I think, a bit of a tie to some of the other solutions you'll see at the middle high school, but the potential that if those locker room spaces aren't needed at the elementary, they could be renovated into some storage space, which is a need that we also heard from multiple programs within the building. And then lastly, potentially some updates to areas adjacent to the library to help modernize that as well. Did I miss anything?
Nope, right on. I'm curious if the group has any initial reactions to
Okay,
elementary.
condition, the ceiling should be good, because they were
The
all.
ceilings, I believe, are. in
Ceilings and
good
lights
shape.
are good,
Yep.
but we talk about flooring.
Yeah, so the light green is really flooring, some cabinetry.
Yeah, the ceilings were all done.
Correct. Yep, you're right. Good
Up
catch.
here, how is our traffic down there now? I mean, when we did the last
Yeah,
one, my kids were in the right
traffic is
school then.
much better since the 2017.
Can it withhold taking that chunk of parking lot and drive out of there?
Yeah.
I mean, are we gonna cause any more?
Do you guys have the exterior?
Yeah,
where you
we can
show
go
it?
back up a slide. Really, it's shortening the length of drop-off pickup. We talked a lot that parking in general isn't a challenge at the elementary school, correct, for staff and
So
parents?
I've counted the last 2 days since I've been here. There are 12 to, I think there's about, well, maybe it's 10 to 12, 10 or 12 of the top part. Like if we look at the right hand side of this, right where we came in, that's the left side. Keep going right. Yeah, like there's 8 or 10 up there that aren't used any day.
Mhm.
So I don't know how many this takes out, but it looks like it's about 10 or 12. So
My concern isn't as much the parking as the pickup.
The queuing length for
Pickup
pickup and drop-off.
drop-off
Yep.
times.
So we would need to explore that a little more, but the one thing we are suggesting is to try to maintain as much pickup and drop off distance as you can, having a single, like a one-way lane that would bypass the cafeteria, so you could still use the whole front of the building and potentially some new frontage along the addition. And then those cars from that lane could come across here and go out the same way they do now. So you'd really hopefully just be losing, the little bit of lane you might have here and maintaining most of your pickup and drop off. And then those that are accessing the parking through your other 2 lanes could use this drive here so that you don't have people trying to turn back into traffic, so to speak, after they drop off or pick up.
Yeah, so an estimate at the end of the day is typically when we get them all lined up, right? The morning, they're spread out over a 10-minute period of time at the drop-off time. So I think collectively, we didn't think losing, 6 to 8 cars was catastrophic, but it's a good question. We probably would want to quantify what that is.
If you drive by there at 3:00, cars are lining up inside that parking lot, and I don't know what time they clear out.
Well, if you're one of the late ones getting there before any kids are let out, you might be sitting on the street waiting to get in the parking lot right now. A couple that does happen.
And this may not be unique. It might not happen here, but if you're the first person here, you park right in front of the door, right? You're not pulling all the way up to the end and allowing everybody to queue behind you. So that is always the complication at the end of the day is, are we making the most efficient use of our frontage? And no, because we all want to be at the front door and pick up our kid at the front door. So maybe this losing 6 to 8 cars may not have a huge impact if we're already seeing a minor backup onto the road. But I don't think it's a huge negative given that we have that bypass lane to handle some of that.
See, you're actually backwards of what we're doing now, they're coming from School Street in. And then-
Yeah, so you'd be coming in, lining up along here, and then that row would exit along the addition and out.
Yeah, one going left, one going right. So, if you keep this driveway going out, the one that you got, red in, where the existing driveway is, no, next one, not that one.
Okay.
They could go left, the other could go right, which would alleviate.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Flow.
They still have to get past that.
Yeah, they gotta get past that, but they'd only be the ones going towards Dickieville.
There looks to be a dead chunk of ground there beneath the red. Any thought that twisting that building, what I would call vertical, and tucking it in there and saving more of that parking area? Or is that not on that
We're
plan?
trying to keep as much for turning radiuses because we're going to want to bring food deliveries in, right? So we're going to have a truck that's going to pull in, back up, and then have to do a Y likely to get out. So we could look at that, but it would complicate our ability to turn a box truck or a food delivery vehicle around in there. Totally honest, we haven't worked out every last nuance of how that vehicular movement works. If the board's giving us the temperature check that we're heading in the right direction, we'll work out a few more of those details before we get further along.
And then the other piece to your question about that area, just south of what we're showing currently, if we start to tuck that against the existing building, you start to compromise and have to eliminate the windows into these second grade classrooms. So we're also trying to make sure we're maintaining the daylight that those currently have, if at all possible. So we certainly can massage the shape of that if this is a direction we want to explore further, and would certainly do that. We somewhat intentionally keep these, kind of just boxes on a plan early on here, again, because they are preliminary. So certainly more design would go into that.
We also have
Good
a
point.
bus with handicap accessible students or handicap accessibility. And often the very youngest students, the early childhood students that might be trees, that drop off and pick up at the beginning and end of the day. So sometimes they go back into that kitchen area to pick up.
Okay.
Down the bottom left.
On the bottom.
But it's most convenient to pick up the youngest students on that, it'd be door 2, the what,
The west.
2 o'clock position.
Okay.
So that's another thing to think about.
But right now, like, the cars start to back up, like, right here back. We don't utilize any of that
Don't
for,
utilize that at all.
yeah,
Okay.
no,
That's not used
not for
anyways.
people waiting.
No, right,
Right.
they wait back further, you're right.
So we may not be having a real negative impact.
If you could
It's
figure out how to
neutral at
utilize
worst.
that, it'd be
Yep.
new space.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Good to know. So great feedback. Any other thoughts, initial reactions on the elementary school? Kind of temperature check. Are we heading in the right direction in terms of concept? Again, details all have to be worked out yet, but is it feeling like a? Okay, excellent. Now we'll jump to the high school. So this is where that concept of master plan is critically important to keep in mind. There's a lot here potentially. So this plan suggests at very high level the potential for a gymnasium and auditorium. Those are the two biggest pieces of this. You'll see when we jump into the floor plan that there's a fair amount of educational improvements and renovation also being considered. But the big bold moves are the potential addition of a gymnasium and an auditorium, and then you'll see a fitness center piece when we get into it. We looked at a number of locations for where this could go. And Aaron, can you remind me of the program? Is it federal at some level, right? If I remember correctly, we've got a land use restriction in place to kind of the north and.
Yeah, so everything kind of between the high school and middle school sidewalk, everything that would be east of that. And we had to have that moved when the tennis courts were taken down because there was a land grant for that for activity. And that's supposed to remain green space for activity. So everything east of that sidewalk.
So as we started,
And it was actually backed by the practice field. So
yeah, it was actually. Yeah, I forget exactly where. So when we first started thinking, maybe take advantage of this green space, right? It's our biggest available green space. Yes, it's practice, but maybe that's the right place for some of this to go. The land use restrictions started to become a complication. We also came to the realization that we'd have to really duplicate a great deal of parking. And maybe duplicating that parking is unnecessary, right? If we can build parking that can support our gymnasium, our theater, and our stadium, why have two major fields of parking on the site and preserve the green space? This chunk of green space generally is not usable for a whole lot, right? Between baseball and the parking now. So consider pushing some parking into that. So again, we're generally not affecting any other programmatic use on the site. With the expansion in this direction. The other small piece you'll note is the ag addition. Really exactly what that looks like is still to be determined, but the real goal is to get a standalone building in support of more of the live animal utilization of the building and program, and that positioning with our STEM STEAM tech ed area works really well off on that side. It's obviously adjacent to some of the spaces they're currently using, but a scaled up version and a more refined version of that building for the live animal work and other ag programming. So why don't we jump into the floor plan, and we'll start on the academic pieces, and then we'll work our way to the south. So as we've noted in the original presentation, kind of the original academic section of the school, so our current main entrance is right here, correct? Middle school sits off on the left. I think this is kind of the section of the school that is just in need of a little bit of a refresh, right? It's still serving us pretty well academically, but a lot of our doors and flooring and ceilings and those types of things are aged. And so that's really what we're suggesting with the light renovation. It's not moving a ton of walls. It's more just of a refresh to address some of that need. You can see the same thing as we turn the corner and come down towards the STEM STEAM tech ed area. A big move here is, I think we might all know that what we have labeled as metals and welding right now really is building operations and maintenance staff first, and maybe a little bit of education second. So really, it's a dual space that is predominantly used for lawnmowers, snow blowers, right? Different building and grounds maintenance equipment. So ideally, we'd be able to return that back to our educational uses. So what this concept looks at is consider taking the current fitness weight room and turn that into our maintenance shop. The positioning makes sense. It's got easy access in and out. There's not a lot of academics, if any, down this hallway. So it's a location where students generally aren't going to be. We've got our main boiler room. We've got a bunch of mechanical, air handling and things that are right above it. So in terms of its proximity to some major pieces of building related equipment, it sure makes sense. And in this case, we would then relocate fitness as part of our addition, intentionally putting it in a little more prominent location. If you wanted to do a public access type of situation, you could envision doing that. We've intentionally shown the doors with a set of doors directly in. So if you wanted to offer more of a community use type of environment, the parking is convenient for them, and they could have a controlled access point on the south end of the site. Other pieces within the existing, really looking at, right now we've kind of got a fab lab-ish space, but it's really down in the tech ed area. Looking at considering bringing the fab lab up into the library so it's more accessible and available to all of our programs, not just those that happen to be based down in our tech ed shop area of the school. A light refresh on the library, really probably libraries for us were a place you went for books. Kids generally don't check out a lot of books anymore. So I'm sorry, I know this is a tough conversation we always have.
They do check out books.
Keeping books, we're not getting rid of books, but starting to head more towards the flexible furniture like you have in the back of the space now, right? Comfortable furniture, lounge furniture, maybe some more portable technology that will allow students, maybe some small rooms that are glassed-in rooms where students can collaborate, work together in a little noisier setting. So don't really know exactly what that is, but kind of, again, a refresh of the library and potentially pulling the fab lab up into this space. Expanding the cafeteria. So we've got a really small cafeteria right now. So looking to expand the cafeteria in the area shown in red here. And then this is a concept whereby if an auditorium is built, we could capture the existing stage and back of house and potentially create a dedicated wrestling space. It's not the biggest space, but it would fit mats and it would really be a good practice venue for the wrestling. You think about just kind of putting up a wall in the current gym and closing off the stage and kind of turning that space over to wrestling. And then, of course, the big moves as we look at the additions are about a 500-seat theater with stage. The back of house spaces really are storage. Stagecraft in our world is where we build sets, where we store sets. We may carve out some small changing rooms out of that. So that really is an undefined block of square footage that is really in direct support of the auditorium itself. This does show a very small component of relocating the district office. So this would free up current district office functions would move. It creates another administrative identity and front door where the majority of our parking are, but it also gives some autonomy to the high school staff to really lead and run the high school building. So again, philosophically, Aaron, I don't know if the board if you've had this conversation before, but
like in our office, it has other offices. You know, in our office, I think should be the school counselor and the activities director, where Heather and I are, and then Ashley is really kind of in a storage closet. So I just think that's a better use of that space.
This isn't the standalone move, right? You don't go building a district office down at the end, but as part of a bigger project like this in terms of an overall reorganization, and it's really more about getting the correct people in the high school office, I think, more than it is about building a district office. So that's really what that move is more about. Large shared set of toilets, weight fitness room. Oh, I knew I was going to do it at least once. I was doing so well. Athletic training room, concession space that really could be shared between the gymnasium and the auditorium when events are held. This is showing a 3-court gymnasium, a small multi-purpose visitor locker room. So that would allow us to get out of our lower level, right? We don't have to use our lower level locker rooms anymore. Those can be dedicated to storage and other things. It's called a locker room, but I don't know that we'd even put a locker in it. It really would just be a room with some small bathrooms attached to it that would allow when a visiting team comes, you give them a fob to the door. They have access to that room. They can leave their bags in there. It probably is just a concrete floor. It's not an overly glamorous space, but the positioning of it really supports the gym. You see, we got a small door out. It also would support the stadium as well. So we think that location works really well. And then there's just a couple of other pieces, storage, and then you'll see this label FEMA in a couple of locations. So as part of the FEMA grant to provide an emergency storm shelter, there are a number of requirements that come with that. One is dedicated storage for specific emergency related supplies. So that's labeled FEMA storage here. And then FEMA mechanical. So the building systems, air handling, water, a generator, they have to be within the enclosure. So you see the dashed line we're kind of showing around the perimeter of the gym. That's where our specific shelter related mechanical equipment and generator and things would go inside the FEMA enclosure. So that is a real quick walkthrough of what has probably generated a lot of questions. So the other thing I guess you could think of if we go back to the site, see if I can do this. That's pretty slick.
Oh no, don't just touch it again.
So close. I was going to say we should get one of these, maybe we shouldn't. The other thought too is as you have parking, right? A lot of people are parking on the street probably for games in the stadium and things like that. This is set up where you could isolate the school, and if you wanted to, allow families and community members to flow through the building to get back to, so that they don't have to walk all the way around. We just did a project up in Denmark. It's a kind of a suburb of Green Bay, if there is such a thing. And exact same thing. Their major field of parking. We put an addition on with a gymnasium, and it blocked all the pedestrian traffic to the stadium. We've made a concerted effort to just create an atrium walkway. They use the toilets. They can get concessions. It's actually nice on a colder evening that families can step inside and warm up a little bit at halftime. So creates a little bit of a maintenance challenge if you have to clean it after a football game, but they said we only have 7 or 8 of them a year. So it's really not that big of an ad in terms of operational, and it allows for a lot more convenience of all of this parking to better support the stadium. So I will turn it back to the board. Where did we get a hit and where did we miss?
Well, the tech ed area, can you speak to what is envisioned there?
You are good, and I didn't mention that. That is not nailed down yet in terms of exact reconfiguration. So again, if we leave tonight and you as a board are feeling like we're generally heading in the right direction, we're going to be meeting with tech ed staff to talk about what's not working, what is working, and what specific needs to happen within that space. Maybe it's not moving a wall at all. We haven't gone to that point yet, but I think the main point here is space is priority one. So if we can get the maintenance staff out of their current, what's labeled welding and metals, that's step one to improving the shop and tech ed environments. And then we need to refine further with them exactly what scope. So your question's right on, and we don't know exactly what that looks like yet.
Is the cafeteria expansion big enough?
I believe, and I think we were looking to seat, I don't recall if it was the whole student body or only half. Clint, the other team member that's working with
I
us.
think we still have to have 2 lunch shifts, but we wouldn't need 3.
Yep. So that's generally what we hear in high schools is 3 lunch periods can be crippling to a schedule in general. In terms of it can diminish the number of course offerings and things that students can access. So most high schools, regardless of their size, would want to get through in 2. So we'll verify though that we can get through in 2.
I may be the only one in here that says this, but I mean, if we're going all out for basketball and volleyball, I mean, I don't know, like wrestling, is it fair enough to just do a little facelift?
Fair.
I guess that's my opinion. I think we should put a little emphasis on that, but I don't know how. But that's my opinion.
Yep. Good thoughts.
I got a question about the proximity of the music room to the performance space.
It's not perfect. If we were starting from scratch, we would back up the stage to music. You've got great music space. So if this was really bad music space, and we could grow tech ed or shops into it and bring music along, we might consider it. it doesn't seem like it's the end of the world. We've got straight hallway connections. We've got ramps. It's not stairs. So, and you generally think it's a couple times a year, right? So if it was a daily thing where they were moving timpani and marimba and all that stuff back and forth, I'd say it's a major consideration. But theoretically, right now they're going from here to here. Now they're going from that distance further. So again, is it perfect? No. I fully acknowledge that in the dream world, you'd have your band room and your choir backed up directly to the stage. But the site's getting tight, as you saw too. So we're a little hesitant to add much more to the addition.
So the land grant issue is nothing that can be challenged.
I think it could be. I don't think that as we just talked through conceptually the advantages of considering building back here, is there weren't as many as I think we originally thought there might be. And I think the biggest disadvantage is we're displacing green space, so we have to do something about that, right? They were out there practicing as we pulled in tonight. So what does that mean? Where do we go with that? We can't really take parking from here because that parking is there to support the stadium. We don't have any flat green space elsewhere to replace it with. So that, at least in my head, that might mean turf. So that's a significant dollar investment just to offset the green space lost. We now need to add some field of parking for a 1,200 seat gymnasium and or a 500 seat theater. So now we've got a big field of parking as well. So I guess our thought was generally, and the parking being, while maybe a little unique in terms of its layout, really does support all of your major community functions at the school, being stadium, gymnasium, auditorium, can all be supported by one field of parking versus duplicating times two.
I guess the question I had asked Aaron is, and I don't know if Kyle's been involved at this point, the dollar value on the project that you're showing us, do you have any idea?
We do, and it's a master plan. So that's the key point. We're not suggesting this is all implementable in one single phase. But as I said from the outset, we think it's important that we are looking to what a future phase could be to make sure that we aren't hamstringing future boards and future communities' abilities to do those projects if they elect to.
Well, I was just referring to, like I'm the kid, the old Sears and Roebuck catalog, mom or dad would give it to me and say, make your Christmas wish list.
Yep.
So I guess I'm trying to just in my own mind,
Sure.
Identify what you're showing me, i.e. is it 10 million, 30 million?
Your second number was closer. Should we turn to Kyle and have him go there next? We can obviously come back to this, but if we want to add the layer of budget to it, we sure can.
I just have a question first about the parking. So does that signify just replacing all those parking spots that you lose? Do we park down the same number of cars in that plan as what we do now?
Yeah, I believe this was basically neutral to where you currently are. So this is about 185 on-site parking spaces.
I think they were gonna just extend the parking lot south down that hill to where
And
it's the
they
baseball.
they add some parking right here.
Yeah,
Good
they're
point,
adding
directly up
parking
front,
right out
yep. Yeah, we're kind of maxed out here, right? I mean, especially if you take a walk to the south, there is some limits. We can't grow towards stadium. We can only grow so far before the slope becomes really challenging as we go to the south. So, generally more parking is better, but we wanted to at least make sure that we were neutral on parking to support these community
Is
events.
that going to propose an issue with having a 500 seat auditorium and a 3-station gym? Because we can't accommodate that in any one event now. So I would imagine parking would become more of an issue.
Even our really large 2,000 student high schools, they generally try, it's not perfect, but they generally try not to schedule simultaneous events of large scale. So maybe there's the fall play, but we have a JV volleyball game or something, right? That doesn't drive huge attendance. We wouldn't want to schedule our largest musical and our sectional final that's going to fill 1,200 plus, right? So it's more of just an operational consideration when we're scheduling, as we try to avoid simultaneous use of those two spaces.
Well, and with a small school, that wouldn't be just because of parking. We probably would
Right.
have students that are
Yeah.
involved in both.
Good point, good point.
Right.
But yeah, I think generally, is it perfect? No, right? I mean, you'd always want more parking. The benefit you do have is you've got great street parking directly adjacent that a lot of schools don't have. And that allows you to not invest, millions of dollars in parking today and replacement of that asphalt in the future, and still support with relative convenience the majority of your events with on-site parking.
Another benefit of just the overall placement and some of the things that Matt mentioned are because we would be replacing already impervious surface of parking lot with building, and obviously extending the parking lot, the stormwater management impact would be less than it would be if we were to fill all your green space with building a parking lot. We would need a little retaining likely based on the grade change to extend the parking lot, but it's the compactness and where we're putting it does factor in with that too, which in turn leaves more green space available.
Great questions, though. Yeah, go ahead.
Has the maintenance director been involved with any of this plan?
Yep, he's been involved in a number. I mean, he walked us room by room, unit by unit, and yep, I don't know, Aaron, if he has seen these plans in detail yet, but
Nobody's
just
seen these plans.
conceptually, when we stood in the fitness center and said, what if this became? I mean, I think the light bulb went on, and he seemed pretty supportive of that.
About the probability of the fitness center, he's like, yeah, we got a garage, we could put a garage door in here and that would work.
Yeah.
That would work just fine.
Get 2 for 1 with that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, he will be, though. It's a good question. We'll make sure that he's involved in seeing these.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Are you ready for Kyle? Everybody's afraid to see these.
All right, so this is the concept budget that we've applied, different cost per square foot for all the different building programs, whether it's additions, light renovations, heavy renovations, circulation renovations, and kind of perfect look at where the project costs are heading. So Ray provided us with the drawings you've seen here today, last week, and we've applied different cost per square foot to all the different building programs. So this is kind of the stage where you'd be at. If you go down to the bottom, it gives you the methodology to how we came up with the cost. We don't bid anything out. None of this is 100% concrete. We kind of say, hey, with past costs or past projects we worked on, what do we have for additions for an auditorium, for gym space, for fitness space, for cafeterias, and we apply cost per square foot. We go into different areas that maybe have light renovation where you're just, everything you see here, we're redoing the ceilings, the lighting, painting the walls, redoing the carpet. They have less cost per square foot as a medium to heavy renovation where you're tearing out floors, tearing out walls, redoing mechanical systems. And we applied different costs per square foot. So how we like to do it is along the top, we have the site development costs for the elementary school, basically the addition space. All the additions at the high school, and then we broke out the auditorium because typically, like Matt and his team was saying, this is a master plan. It's not all in one chunk. We wanted to see the segregation between the different costs. Then the next category is the elementary school, went to the high school additions, finished it up with the auditorium. And at the budget bottom, we did the summary where we take all the site work and construction costs, couple in district soft costs, which is design fees, furniture, equipment, technology, maybe it's playground equipment, tech ed equipment and such. And then we have a contingency, and we have the contingency higher at this stage than lower because, like I said, we have 1 or 2 drawings. We don't have the details. We don't have any subcontractor input. We're trying to anticipate what other costs we could be in these different building programs. So if you want, I can go real quick through these items. Starting off with the site development at the elementary school, we take the building addition area, which is basically the cafeteria and kitchen, to 6,400 square feet. We're not doing a lot with parking areas. We're going to disturb a little bit of the area around where the addition is, but with the size of it, we're probably not doing stormwater detention and such. So we applied $35 a square foot. Typically, if there was a bigger area, we'd be down in the 20s. Because it's so small, we have to have a little bit larger unit price for that. Then coming up into the high school additions, you've seen with the parking lot additions, and then Ryan mentioned along the southern side or right up against the baseball field, we're probably going to have some retaining walls. That drives up the cost per square foot that we apply to just the building addition area for site work. There's probably gonna have to be stormwater detention areas. So that's why we felt comfortable with a $35 a square foot. And then with the auditorium, because you're doing most of the parking and all those modifications in the building additions for the gymnasium and the fitness and everything else, that brought the cost per square foot down for just addressing that area. You already have the parking, you already have the stormwater taken care of. So that brings us to a total of just under $2 million just for the site work. How much more time do I have if I have to go faster?
2 minutes.
Okay. Well, maybe if you don't have questions, basically coming down, you can see the cost per square foot. So we applied to the different areas. It tends to get higher in a cost per square foot when the area is smaller because you don't have the efficiencies tied to those buildings. When you're doing a brand new space that's 50 or 100,000 square feet, the cost per square foot comes down substantially because it's melted through all the other different areas. We wanted to account for a little bit of kitchen equipment. The light renovation, you can kind of see what we're accounting for in those areas. In the elementary there, medium renovation, it's all the light renovation scope plus a little heavier demo, probably modify mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems in those areas. We have the circulation, which we talked about earlier. Some of the flooring and ceiling was done, and we can modify this later to adjust for those items. And then there's the gross up factor that Matt and his team brought up that you don't see it on the plans right now because you have mechanical spaces that could be elevated above some of the different areas, and it kind of overlaps some of the building additions. So just for the construction of the elementary school, not including the site development, there's roughly 6.3 million accounted for right there. Again, very high level, can be adjusted greatly once we have more detail. High school additions, took the same methodology, applying the cost per square foot to all those different areas. Then with the auditorium, you can see that because of the fit and finish of that space, $425 is a lot of money. But when you're staggering the floor to have it for recessed seating, and you have all the acoustics, the lighting, the sound packages, the mechanical, electrical systems that account for in there, that gets burned up pretty quick, and it's not a massive building area. So then on the bottom, we've taken all the numbers from the top, added in the district soft costs as different percentages. Typically, it's 12% for different soft costs. If you go on the auditorium, you see it's a little bit more because you have more of the technology and audio visual to those areas. And then we applied a 10% contingency to every single different area, and we came up with a total. So at this point, high level, roughly just under 7.3 million we've seen at the elementary school for all those. And at the high school additions renovations, you're just over 23.5 million. And then with the auditorium, you're about 9.5 million for those areas. Maybe any feedback you want to throw in there, Rick?
No, I'd say the one layer that's always missing here, this is a big number. The kind of what does it cost a typical taxpayer is another critical number that's not here. That is coming on November
7th, we've got our representative from Robert W. Baird coming to talk us through just tax impact of anything that we're going to do moving forward.
So that again, these are always big numbers and they're hard to decipher, but most community members will want to see this in partnership with what does it mean to attack on a taxpayer basis. And that lens will be provided on the 7th of November then by Lisa from Baird.
Yeah. Thank you for providing that.
And then unit prices account for twofold, where the economy is now with pricing. And we're seeing a lot of that with referendums that passed in the last year and the last 6 months. And also anticipating if you've had a referendum next fall, you pass the referendum, you take 6 to 9 months to design, you're starting about 6 to 9 months later. So the pricing we're trying to anticipate is for almost 2 years from now, where they could be. Some things will come down. A lot of times they go up at an incremental inflation rate. It could be 2, 3, 4% is typical.
All right, thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, board. Good to see all of you.
Appreciate all
Be back soon.
Do we want to take a quick break? The restroom, and then we'll start up our regular meeting?
You guys don't want to stay for the regular meeting?